What's up YouTube? So welcome to today's video where I'm going to be going over my Magic Find character that I made. Now the reason I'm doing Magic Find is because I do think that Magic Find is still better than no Magic Find, and it allows you to run culling services, and it allows you to, most importantly, cull your own rares. Now right now I'm pretty much doing a 60% deli map, and Defile Cathedral is pretty much the new, what's it called? It's a new Crimson Temple. It's a slightly better layout for spawning, what's it called, for Legion, so that's why I choose to run it. And the map is not too bad. You'll see, sadly enough, that even with this character, which is around, I think 85% Quant and I think 500-600% Rarity now, that not that much loot seems to drop. And I don't know if my character is bugged or what, but most of the loot you'll see actually comes from the deli rewards and Legion that I'll be clearing, but you can see a quick little glimpse of what it looks like. Now I have found a couple 7 years bad luck cards, so I do think that magic finding does make a difference. And the big problem right now is the cost of mats are not really, what's it called, do not really justify using like winged scarabs or even gilded scarabs in a lot of cases. I do not think you actually make back your money. But as I said, I just wanted to showcase this character a little bit. You can pretty much use this character in just for general gameplay, and it's really good for farming like legions. And if you do run into the Solar's touch mobs, you will find a lot of loot, and you'll probably find a divine or so. Now I do have some regrettable news, is that some people actually told me that they actually might have nerfed Solar's touch. There's someone who said that they were doing group play, and they actually ran over 100% deli maps in the past, and they noticed that now they get a lot less drops from Solar's touch. So wow, I got a lot of flash, right? So this kind of gives you a look into the state of magic finding currently. And let me just kill the boss. Oh, we got Silence and Frost, Pandemonious, but I'm pretty sure that is from the div card scare. You can see here the boss dies pretty fast as long as you have headhunter buffs. And the build plays pretty smoothly. Like, we have this amount of quant, and we actually do run into the god touch, and the essence mob pretty much dies. But nothing is really that big of a deal. Overall, one of my favorite magic finding characters. Is just a shame that, okay, well, sometimes you die. So overall, I do think the meta will evolve into using a dedicated all-purpose Magic Find character, and that's pretty much because Magic Find usually dominates the meta in terms of how eventually people mostly gear up their characters. Most people want to find more loot in the map, and I think at this stage in the game, it is more imperative than ever to be able to find more loot in the map. Now, the big problem with Magic Find is that you're pretty much multiplying a base that is much lower than before. So if you take it at before, the base of loot was 20 and now it is 1. If you have 200% quant on your gear and map, you'll pretty much be getting 2 times the amount of loot at 2, and the other one is getting 40. So the base of base loot in the game is lower than before for juice mapping. Now I do know that normal mapping is pretty much the same or even better. But in terms of juice mapping, it is very bad because of the removal of Beyond. Now, the benefit of doing this, magic finding characters, you can pretty much just run low investment like Legion Dunes or something like that, or MF Deli Mirror, or not MF, but Deli Mirror Shran with Dunes, with Legion, I mean. And you will eventually find a Solar's Touch Mob, and a lot of builds, if you have a lot of damage and you run into the God Touch Mob or the Pantheon, then you will probably instantly kill the boss. Now, the problem of instantly killing the boss is that you aren't able to call in a Magic Finder, and then a Magic Find Caller actually takes a pretty substantial chunk of the loot. And you can see here, these people take 1/3, and you will actually get a lot of people looking for you to call their mobs. So Shikari Touch, loot 1/3, and this is pretty much what happens on TFT now. Now you might think that, oh, they must have fixed it, so you don't rely on TFT more, but with this new loot that they added, it seems like it's more imperative than ever as people are actually going on TFT Discord to try to find a Magic Find Caller. Now, I just wanted to quickly go over how does the character actually feel in terms of magic finding. I know lastly, a lot of people tried out magic finding in Crimson Temple, and you're kind of wondering how is the character's strength now with the nerf of juice mapping. Now, the biggest thing is you can no longer rely on headhunter buffs for all your damage and survivability. If you just saw me doing that Defiled Cathedral, you will see that I only got around 17 to 20 buffs. Even when I did the Legion, I at most had like 25 stacks. Now before, if you had Beyond on your map and you had a Beyond Sextant, and the map was decently juiced, you would have 40 plus Headhunter stacks almost immediately. Like as soon as you clear a couple packs, all the Beyond mobs would spawn and you would have 40 Headhunter stacks, and you would pretty much be invincible for the whole map. And what this meant is that you could actually carry like 6-man parties with no aura bot on Kinetic Blast on a Leech group, and that was just absolutely crazy. Now, in terms of balance, I don't think it's really fair that Headhunter was that strong that you could pretty much take a character with White Wand, Greed's Embrace, Centauri's Answer, and pretty much be able to do a completely juiced map, and even with Sentinel on it, and be able to do it with no problem at all. Now, what this means is that you can no longer go full budget on a Magic Find character. Gone are the days that you can pretty much have super budget gear and putting in like uniques or random like 1 chaos uniques in slots, like Moonsorrow Wand or something like that. So that means you now need to invest into your character and make sure that it's quite durable before you actually go into magic finding. Now, a lot of people also ask me about bow versus wand, and bow versus wand is a pretty interesting scenario in that bow actually has a much higher base damage for both elemental and physical, and what that means is that the base damage that you scale off of is a lot higher. So if you look at the bow, here is 267 to 680, and if I go to my Deadeye KB character, and I actually did test out magic finding on the Wander build, and it was actually noticeably worse. So you can see here, the top end of my wand is 309, and they're pretty much the same tier of wand in terms of price and cost. So the bow has a much higher base damage, and I do think that elemental is a lot cheaper starting off than physical. Now, if you want to learn how to craft a Fizz bow, look at my previous video if you're interested in doing any sort of magic finding. Now, Tornado Shot is also a single button ability, which has much better single target than Kinetic Blast. So Tornado Shot is an ability that pretty much you just shoot, and it's good for both single target and clear. So what that means is that you don't need to rely on only Kinetic Blast for single targets. So I even put some totems on this build, and a single target is pretty respectable. And once you have Headhunter buffs, you can pretty much kill anything in the game. Now, Wander, if you ever run out of Headhunter buffs, you are pretty much screwed if you meet a rare, because Kinetic Blast just doesn't cut it for single target. Kinetic Blast main strength is for clear and if there's a lot of mobs nearby. So that's actually the biggest difference. Now, Wander does have access to Shield Charge, and Shield Charge is especially important because it's pretty much a spammable movement skill. And you also have a Quant shield that you can use, Centauri's Answer, which is 8% Quant. And what this also means is that you can actually run Greed's Embrace for even more rarity and Quant, because you can use Shield Charge for your movement skill, meaning that you actually don't need any movement speed on your build. Now, overall, the build is relatively expensive because I do think you want a Headhunter now in order to play Magic Find. I did try it out with Inspired and Mage Blood, and it didn't feel as good. So if you only use Inspired Learning, it's not going to feel as good because the buff only lasts 20 seconds. So Magic Finding is pretty expensive overall just to get started. And I do know that Headhunter is incredibly expensive right now. Now, without good Ventors, it is incredibly hard to cap your resist. And I did have to cap my resist by using a Flask. Now, it's not really too big of a deal when you're mapping, because as soon as you get a few Headhunter buffs, you should be pretty much capped res the whole time. Now, a lot of people ask me why not use a Wind Ripper. Now, you don't want to use a Wind Ripper because the loss of damage outweighs the gain in quantity. Using a Wind Ripper on my profile is probably around a 60 to 70% damage loss. Another common question I get is why not use Bisco's Collar instead of Ascetic? And that because for using Ascetic, you have to have a white item and a magic item. So you'll see here I have a white quiver and a magic helmet. Now, Bisco's doesn't really work against calling God Touch rares, because you can see here, you only get increased rarity of items dropped by slain magic enemies and then quantity from slain by normal enemies. So this amulet actually does not work at all for Solar's touch mobs. Now, I am running an item rarity chest with additional curse and attack crit, and making this chest is pretty much just Awaken Orbing together, the item rarity and attack crit, and then Reforged Caster with suffixes cannot be changed in order to get the additional curse. And I do run Elemental Weakness Sedemas, which I do think are incredibly expensive with Perfect Quant, in order to take advantage of, the additional curse. So you can see here it's 15 Divines roughly. So not too bad at the moment. So the character overall is going to be relatively expensive. So let me go over the gear I have. So this bow, I showed you how to craft in my latest video. But basically, I think this bow is around almost 800 PDPS. So you need a really, really good bow in order to get the damage, in order to kill mobs at the start. Now, we're using the Ascetic, which gives you rarity with a normal item equipped and quantity with a magic item equipped. Now, this item is not that expensive. I think it's around like 1 divine or less if you want a good roll. Now, right here, we are using this because we have a magic item here, and what we care about on this helmet is a synthesized rarity, and then we roll dragons on the prefix and suffix we crafted on rarity of items dropped by slaying rare or unique enemies. So right here, this helmet pretty much gives us almost 100% rarity, and this does go up to 20% on the synthesized implicit. Now, this amulet is a no-brainer. I do think if you want a stronger character overall, you could probably drop this for a Shaper Quant amulet, a gold amulet with rarity. I think you can get like 50% rarity and 10% quant. And that rarity means that you can use a rarity helmet with prefix and suffix. So you can use an actual rare helmet and you can use a rare quiver. So I do think like if an amulet like that exists, then that's probably the best case scenario, but it's probably going to be 100 plus divines because it's super rare to get quant and double tier rarity. Now this quiver, you pretty much just use additional arrow quiver. Some people say you can also use another +1 chain, so it's pretty much up to you, but make sure this quiver is normal. Now for Ventors, you pretty much want as much quant and rarity as possible, so you should always search for 10 quant, 35 plus rarity, and as much elemental resistance as possible. So here you can see this one has like 100% LE res, and this one is pretty bad at like 40% LE res. Now the chest, like I mentioned, has item rarity. And I actually got ailment immunity, but that's because I unveiled and gambled on the prefix a few times. And I crafted on life, and it has attack crit, item rarity. And it was a pretty easy craft, pretty deterministic, and kind of fun to do. Now, Sedemas are just LE weakness Sedemas, and I think these actually cost, like I said, 15 divines. Gold Worm, best implicit is probably movement speed. And you pretty much just want 20 quantity on these. So they're pretty cheap, like 10 chaos, and if you get the enchant, probably 1 divine. And then for flash, I'm actually using this flash right here in order to cap my resist. If you can look at my resist, it's actually really, really bad. So with these flasks, with just this flask on, I'm able to get capped res, and once I get some headhunter buffs, it's perfectly fine. Now, something interesting to note is that Divination Distillate is being used, so make sure to get a max quant, max rarity roll. I actually didn't get it. So let's see. With all of my buffs, you can see here. So for Tornado Shot, 451% rarity and 567%. And then with this thing, for 45%, I have 600% rarity. So which is pretty good. Like, top tier colors can probably get like 800-900% with Pathfinder. You can probably get higher. I don't have perfect gear. You can get a rarity implicit headhunter. You can definitely get 3% rarity over here. And there's a lot of tiny little adjustments you can make. You can get 3% rarity over here. And I can also get Alchemist Genius on a medium cluster. So overall, the character is really squishy, but it has some level of armor. Could also technically drop Determination. I am running Determination so I don't get killed instantly. And I have cast 1 damage, take a Molten Shell. But you can technically run Purity of Elements or something if you feel that you're dying too much. Now, overall, this jewel is pretty important for Elegant Hubris. Elegant Hubris, I have 120% rarity. I just bought this today for like 10 divines. You can use Path of Building to search it up. So I actually have this node right here. And this allows me to ignore attribute requirements. And attribute requirements are pretty hard to come by, especially int. Now, the big problem with this is that it actually removes the dex, so it lowers your chance to hit. So until you get some headhunter buffs, your, your chance to hit is going to be pretty bad. You could technically run a golem, but I don't really have a spare slot or spare socket at the moment because I'm running Mark on Hit, Blood Rage, Sniper's Mark, Flame Dash, and then I'm running Molten Shell, cast 1 damage taken, Arrogance, Precision. And then for my links, Wed, Crit Damage, Culling Strike, Divergent Tornado Shot, Awaken Vicious Projectiles, Mirage Archer. Oh, I have Awaken Forkin usually for culling. This is when I do the culling service, I swap this in. And then I have a Ballista Totem over here. Item Rarity, Tornado Shot, Focus Ballista, Ballista Totem, added cold damage. And then this one I could probably swap in for something else. Maybe Ice Golem right here. And here I have Enlighten, Determination, Hatred, and Petrified Blood. Now the reason we want to use Petrified Blood is Petrified Blood makes it so that we can use our Divination Distillate and it will just stay on the whole time because the Blood Rage degen actually cancels out the Flask. So that's pretty important in terms of making it so that we never actually lose our Flask uptime. Now, there is a lot of flexibility in this build in terms of large clusters. Large clusters, I don't really think I'm doing the best job. I'm pretty much reusing some 25% effect, life, dex, and strength cluster, and I corrupted this and used a tainted divine orb or whatever it's called, tainted divine teardrop. And I have pressure points, quick getaway. I have a corrupted blood jewel here, and then I have ricochet on my forbidden jewels. So I have far shot here. Endless munitions. I do think it is actually possible to get 100% spell suppress if you do decide to use the Raider Forbidden Jewel instead and use Inveterate and take these nodes. And that might be something I'm willing to do in the future because it's pretty annoying dying. And you can actually make a relatively tanky Magic Finder. Now I am using a massive Thread of Hope right here to get this node, this node, this node for accuracy. Finesse, Aspect of the Link, Forces of Nature, and also allows me to take 1 point and get this Rarity node. So overall, Massive Thread of Hope is pretty insane for this build. Now we do prioritize some projectile speed. So we have Long Shot, we have the Projectile Mastery for more projectile speed, and then this one here that allows us to convert increases and reductions to projectile speed. Also applies to damage with bows. So overall, this character is relatively squishy, but you can do like mostly juice maps. You can also run normal maps, and it should be perfectly fine as long as you get some headhunter buffs. And your baseline Rarity and Quant is really strong, and I do think I will upgrade this character more because it's always nice to see the numbers go up. And at this point, 80% Quant, 600% Rarity, I'm pretty happy with. Like, you could get to 100% Quant if you use Greed's Embrace and you were using Centauri's on a Wander, but in terms of the base level strength of the character, I do think that this version is going to be a lot stronger than the Wander. Now, as I said and showed you at the start, the build can do up to 80% deli, but you should never try to go to 100% deli. A lot of people ask me, why not just do 100% deli? And it's because the loss of clear speed is not really worth it. Now, right now, it is really hard to justify doing full juice mapping, and I'll show you why real fast. If you actually look at the cost of the supplies, deli orbs aren't really that cheap at the moment. If you look at Find the Leaderboard, I'm pretty sure it's like near 9 to 10 chaos or so. And it's just really, really bad in terms of... Wait, did that guy have... Oh, I see. So, basically, overall, it is super, super bad right now. The price of the juicing stuff has not really caught up to people realizing that it's not really that profitable anymore. And if you actually see here, most of these juicing stuff is really, really expensive. It's like 8 chaos for a Find the Leaderboard. And you would probably make back your money if you use deli rewards fill faster, but even like a bad deli orb, let's go see like the armor one, right? This one is usually the cheapest one, the armor and blacksmith deli orbs. And you can see here, they're not really that cheap. They're like still 3 to 5 chaos, and a lot of these people at 3 chaos are actually price fixing. So you spend like 15 chaos on the deli orbs for, let's say 60% deli, which is a good amount. And then you go look at the scarabs, and the scarabs you would think are really, really cheap, because how could anyone ever make that money by putting in gilded divination, gilded reliquary? And you can see here, if you put the stock at 5, the stuff is still really, really expensive. I honestly do not think that you make back money if you're spending 8 chaos per scarab for divination and reliquary. I think people are still pricing the stuff for what it used to be. And at this point in the game, in terms of what they did to the past league mechanics, that's just not the case. You don't actually make back your money, or you don't actually turn a profit if you use gilded divination reliquary scarabs, in my estimation. I mean, it's possible if you get lucky in the long run and you find a T1 drop or T0 drop, but there's not enough currency in the map, even with magic finding, to sustain it, in my opinion. Now, it's also potential for a spell-based magic find character to perform better, like Cold BV, because you get to scale the base damage of your spell. Now, the biggest thing is, is the rare nerf in juice maps is super noticeable. I know GGG set one of their philosophies was removing the amount of rares in the maps, and they really succeeded in that. You probably have like 80% less rares in the maps if you had Beyond before, and this leads to a huge loss of power for Headhunter. And I do think that this is a huge factor. But overall, for this character, if you just want to do some regular mapping or juice mapping or whatever, or Expedition or Legion, this character honestly feels really good to play. It is a very high investment character, but it is something that you can work towards, and you can always help out your friends if they're still playing the league, if they need a rare being Cole, as you can probably get around. I think with this character maxed out 700 to 800% rarity at 80% quant or 85 with Alchemist Genius. But thanks for watching, everyone. I hope this has given you some insight into how to build a Magic Find character if you want to go down that path. But just know this character, in terms of the loot that you find, is much worse than last league. But it is still better than what you would have if you had no Magic Find character at all. But thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you find more Mirrors, Exalts, and Mage Plus than me. I'll be finding the Divines, and see you next time. Bye!